The January 19th, 2022 meeting of the Williamsburg Planning Commission to order. Ms. Moore, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kale?
Here. Here.
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Tarley?
Here.
Mr. Sokolowski?
Here.
Ms. Liebel?
Here. The first order of business on the agenda is the election of officers. Do I have a nomination for chair?
Yes, I'd like to nominate David Boswell.
We have a nomination for Mr. Boswell. Are there any other nominations? If not, we'll close the nominations. Ms. Moore?
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Sokolowski?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Also have first vice chair, second vice chair, and a secretary. Do I hear nominations?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and nominate all three at once. So I nominate John Tarley for first vice chair, Greg Granger for second vice chair, and Heather Moore for secretary.
Is there a second?
There does not need to be a second.
Doesn't, okay.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Sokolowski?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Okay, congratulations and welcome to our new members. We have, as the first order of business, the approval of our minutes from our regular meeting of December 15th, 2021. Have there been any updates, corrections, changes to the minutes as they're posted on the website?
I'd like to make a modification on what I said. It said Commissioner Tarley stated that she was an example of a public servant, referring to Carolyn Murphy. I think I'd like to say outstanding public servant, I think is what my actual comments were. Other than that, I don't have any other changes.
Absolutely true. Anything else? Is there a motion?
I move to adopt the minutes from the December meeting
Correction.
with the correction.
Seconded.
Seconded?
Mr. Kale?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Sokolowski?
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, our next agenda item is an open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to come up and speak to the commission about anything that's on your mind. We have opportunity for public input on the matters that are before us for hearing today, but this is an opportunity for anybody else to speak. Seeing nobody coming, we'll close that open forum and we'll move on to the consent agenda items. We have two consent agenda items today. SPR 21-012 and SPR 21-019. Since they're on the consent agenda, we typically do not have a presentation or discussion. However, per our bylaws, a member can request one or both of those to be removed from the consent agenda. Any requests to do that? Okay. So then, do I have a motion to approve the two consent agenda items?
I will move to approve consent agenda items SPR number 21012 and SPR number 21019.
Seconded.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Sokolowski?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
All right, that's the consent agenda items. We have two items today for public hearing, PCR 21-017 and 018. And Aaron is going to present them together. Since they're
Yes,
together, they're going to be presented together. Okay.
correct. Good afternoon. This is a request of Castle Development Partners for a special use permit to increase the density allowed in the Limited Business District LB1 with proffers from 14 unit 14 units per net acre to 19 units per net acre for the property located at 506 North Henry Street. Additionally, they're also requesting a special use permit to encroach on the slopes in excess of 30% up to 1.5 acres for the development of 162 apartments located at 506 North Henry Street. You can see here on the drawing that the slopes that they're discussing have been highlighted. Just to note that the commission has seen this plan before, but just not in the level of detail. They have reached a final site plan kind of drawing. So before we had kind of buildings bubbled out, but these are the actual footprints, and the engineering has been completed to handle the stormwater in these areas as well. The 2021 comprehensive plan designates this property as mixed use. Mixed-use land use category is intended to provide a degree of flexibility in land uses to be developed in areas suitable for a mixture of residential and commercial uses. Incorporating a potential range of residential, office, and moderately scaled commercial uses, mixed-use development should be subject to a thorough urban design review that stresses the quality of architecture, proper building siting, and well-designed landscaping. Equally important, this category should promote preservation, revitalization, and adaptive reuse, where appropriate, of existing historic structures. The density of residential component of mixed-use development should be appropriate to the character of the area. Mixed land use is designed to be more limited than the downtown commercial, corridor commercial, and urban commercial land use, but more flexible than office land use. The LB1 Limited Business District downtown implements the mixed use for the North Boundary Street area north of Merchant Square. The LB1 zoning district allows a mixture of residential and commercial uses that are more restricted than the adjacent B1 downtown district. Residential uses are allowed at a base of 14 dwelling units per acre, with an increased density allowed with a special use permit. This parcel is currently zoned LB1. The statement of intent for LB1 reads, "This district is established to allow a mixture of the residential, office, and commercial uses in the areas north and south of the B1 downtown district that are designated by the comprehensive plan mixed-use land use. Residential yard requirements are imposed to help maintain the residential scale and character of the area. Increased residential density and higher intensity uses such as parking garages may be allowed with a special use permit." The Architectural Review Board and Site Plan Review Committee have reviewed this project. The Architectural Review Board approved the proposed buildings at their September 28th, 2021 meeting after reviewing the prior, conceptual review. There were some modifications that were made, and they have developed the final drawings that the ARB was satisfied with. The Site Plan Review Committee reviewed the proposed development on November 17th, 2021, and held a follow-up review at their meeting at December 15th, 2021. The committee discussed trash removal, the parking on the west end of the site, and previous questions regarding a fence and a proposed bus stop location. The fence was not incorporated into the plan as it was seen not to benefit either the property owners nor the adjacent property owners and would likely impede the flow of wildlife in the area. They ensured that there was ample lighting in the area of concern to the west of the property to address any safety issues. Trash removal will be the responsibility of the residents to bring their trash to the compactor site for collection and removal. Developer will fund a new bus stop in this area, and the exact location is being finalized by WADA and the city. That has been under conversation for some time now, but I think we're settling on something kind of out here on the city right-of-way. So the actual location is not located on the developer's property, but out here on the city right-of-way to provide access to the bus. The applicant is proposing to increase the density for this parcel from 19 units per acre, with proffers agreed to during the rezoning process in 2020. A total of 162 units are proposed, with 13% of those being reserved for individuals making less than 80% of the area median income. This restriction is in place for 15 years. A copy of the proffers was included in the board's packet. The applicant is also proposing encroachments into the 30% slopes not to exceed 1.5 acres. The city stormwater administrator has reviewed the proposed site plan and found it to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance section 21-262. The special use permits were previously reviewed and recommended for approval at the regular August 2020 meeting of the Planning Commission and were approved by the City Council at their regular meeting in September 2020, along with an amendment to the comprehensive plan, a rezoning, and an amendment to the zoning ordinance to allow for slope waivers. The special use permits expired as there was not an approved site plan within 1 year of the special use permit approval. In the intervening period, the developer has reached final ARB approval as well as completing the engineering required for a final site plan. There have been no significant changes to the proposal since it was first approved. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of PCR 21-017 and PCR 21-018, a request of Castle Development Partners for the special use permit to increase the density allowed in the Limited Business District LB1 with proffers from 14 units per acre to 19 units per acre for the property located at 506 North Henry Street. This request, and the request for a special use permit to encroach on slopes in excess of 30% up to 1.5 acres as provided in zoning ordinance section 21-262 for the future development of 162 apartments located at 506 North Henry Street in accordance with the proffers that were made on September 15th, 2020. In addition, staff recommends the Planning Commission approve this final site plan SPR 21-010 contingent upon the approval of the special use permit being approved by City Council. I'm available to answer any questions should the commission have any. And then due to some COVID concerns, both the applicant and the applicant's typical representative are not present today. We do have a representative present from Land Tech that could answer questions regarding the site plan. And I think may have some statements from the developer if the board or if the commission has any questions.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Questions for Aaron about that presentation or the contents of the application?
I do have a couple questions, Aaron. You had indicated that the memo had a typo. It should be 19 units.
Correct.
But is the 162 correct then?
Yes, that is the total number of units, yes.
And so I just did math. And is it that it would be 14 units per acre, it would be 119 units?
Yes.
All right, so we're talking about 43 ballpark extra units.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had for now. Thank you.
If I may, the 13%, would you cover that for me again? The number of lower income, affordable units?
Certainly. So the total 162 units proposed, 13% of those are reserved for individuals making less than 80% of area median income. Area median income is determined annually by HUD.
And what is that right now?
Give me a second, I have it written down. So area median income and you'll have to forgive me, the proffers are kind of worded strangely. So area median income in this case is 1.5 persons, and so you have to take the average of a 1-person and a 2-person median income and average those out, and that comes out to $50,725, and so that's for 1.5 people. I don't know how you calculate income of a half a person, but that is the way the proffers are crafted. And that comes out to $1,268. That's for a 1-bedroom unit, and then the 2-bedroom unit comes out to $1,521. And I will note that those numbers are likely different than the numbers that you saw in 2020. Like I said, that the HUD area median income is calculated on an annual basis, so it is a fluctuating number that moves depending on the census reported income.
And what do we think the other units are going to be priced at?
I do not have those numbers.
Okay. And in 15 years, the 13% reserve goes away.
Correct. And the way the proffer is written is that it is 15 years from the last leased apartment. So it's not 15 years from the time they swing the doors open, but it's 15 years from the time they lease the last apartment in the development.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have right now.
Okay. I had a follow-up question with that when you mentioned that the median income, area income is recalculated annually.
Yes.
Does that then mean that the other 87% of those apartments would then factor into the median area income as well, potentially raising that, and as well as the prices of those affordable housing units?
That is certainly possible. If they're reporting income, that income is reported
Okay.
to the American Census, and then those numbers are calculated based on that.
Okay.
But by the same token, in any given year, if the area median income declined,
Yes,
then the rents would have to go down.
correct.
All right.
And the most recent, those figures that I just gave you are based on the most recent figures that HUD published, which were in April of 2021. And so they usually publish those numbers sometime in spring. They may change in the next month, they may change in June, but they will use the number that's being published when they're leasing.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Aaron? Okay, let's open the public forum and the public hearing and ask the applicant. I understand the applicant's attorney and, are not here, but if you have some comments, we'd welcome them.
Hi, Chase Grog with Land Tech Resources. Again, Tommy with Castle Development apologizes that he couldn't make it today. He had COVID go through the house, and William with our team kind of down the same line. So primarily here to answer any main questions that you have. I have a pretty good idea of, the entire project. I know there was some concerns with the one position of the trash compactor. They implemented this. They've done multiple apartment building complexes. They implemented this about 6 years ago in some of their other apartment complexes. The benefits of it is it's actually a compactor, so it pushes the trash in as it goes, so you get better compaction in each one instead of having multiple trash locations around the site. As well as on top of that, they can keep one area clean instead of trying to keep multiple areas clean. The trash truck doesn't need to go to multiple locations, as well as the compactor's set up with a sensor. So when it's full, it actually alerts the trash company, so they come and pick it up, so they're not coming like every week to a half-empty compactor just because it's on the schedule. It's more economical and, good for the environment. And then as well with the slopes, this is an existing site. I don't know if any of you have walked the site before, but the existing buildings out there, there's no current stormwater facilities out there. All of the slopes that we're dealing with are already eroding, pretty badly. So with us proposing the development and being able to establish that, put in some good stormwater features, should help the RPA actually by limiting everything that's eroding down into it as it sits on the site. Those are pretty much all the main points. I'm, again, happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Questions?
Well, thank you. So in reviewing regulations on, special use, it says primary consideration for the approval of increased density should be how the scale and character of the proposed project relate to its immediate surroundings and downtown planning area as a whole. So the immediate surroundings on that side of the railroad tracks, Highland Park. So can you address that particular issue from the applicant's perspective as to how that will not negatively or would positively impact the neighboring residential area?
Yeah, so, I think, some of the benefit, one of the benefits will be a bus stop. There's not a bus stop there already, so them helping to coordinate that with the city and WADA to be able to bring that extra benefit, to that area, as well as my understanding with that increased density, it increased the amount of affordable units that were brought to the project. So that, helps the surrounding area as, for people in the city to be able to have affordable options of living. That's really all I know off the top of my, from the little bit I know about the project.
One of the other requirements is that there be height requirements. Could you speak to, what from the site, what kind of height we're looking at for these units?
I believe they're 4-story buildings, so that, brings their height in, probably roughly around 40 or 45. I have personally not looked at the architectural. I know there was a lot of review that went into it a year ago, as well as, I know there's been a lot of discussion with, in between Highland Park and this project, there's about 300 feet of woods. So I know that was, in the discussions with the fence, that, a fence and that there's already a pretty good screening from the surrounding project with the topography of the site, as well as kind of some natural buffers that just exist from the project, as it stands. So I know when they were going through all the architectural review processes and looking at all the angles, the increased landscaping with the, natural buffers, everything was done to try and make this project fit. Again, the site's already developed, with the hotel, so making it blend in nicely with what's already there so it doesn't have a negative impact on the surrounding areas.
Yeah, those were some of the concerns from the residents over there, that this would be readily seen from their yards, and that they don't have any of that right now, so.
Yeah, again, with it kind of being, it's tucked back in there with the existing height, with the, with a 300-foot existing tree buffer, no matter really how much, that is a great natural buffer as it is on its own, no matter what landscaping you also put on top of it.
That's all I have for right now.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
This is a public hearing. I don't have any speaker cards, but we don't exactly have a full house, so I don't think it's necessary. Would anybody like to address the commission about this application? Please. If you would, please state your name and your address so that our secretary has it for the records.
Eletha, E-L-E-T-H-A, Davis, 532 Dunning Street, Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm really concerned with the increase in the units out there, with the traffic impact that it will have on Highland Park. I am a lifetime resident of Highland Park. It really concerns me. It also concerns me, which we're trying to do with the bus stop, where exactly the bus stop will be. I know that they are in negotiation, if I hear it correctly, and I apologize, I have a hearing problem, so I didn't know if I heard that correctly, what you all were saying. So those are the concerns that we have with the traffic impact on the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. Aslan, would you like to make any public comments? Seeing no more public comments, I'll close the public hearing. Discussion.
I'm happy to open it up. I was a no vote on this last time, and I'm still not enthusiastic about it. I think there's been a lot of conversation for some time about needing to increase housing in our community that the everyday Joe can afford, and the people who work in our police station and our fire station and municipal building and such. I'm not sure that this is really going to be affordable for them. It might be a couple of the units that could be affordable, but we just had a nice Christmas season, and we had lots of restaurants closed that were struggling for staffing, and Colonial Williamsburg is struggling to find enough employees. I believe when Highland Park was developed, it was developed with the notion of we wanted, Colonial Williamsburg wanted to have a place where families could settle down and grow, and their kids could walk to school, and they can walk to work, and they can rely on one car. And I think that was great wisdom on Colonial Williamsburg's part. And in my mind, I would much rather see an expansion of Highland Park almost on this site. It's right next to train tracks, which are noisy, with coal cars that are going to be going down them. I still don't see the logic between coal cars and a swimming pool next to each other. But I would really prefer to see something more affordable as opposed to what I'm going to refer to as somewhat luxury apartments. We need to have families able to move into our community. We need to have people who are young professionals who graduate from college and want to settle here, be able to find a place and walk to work and walk to the vibrant downtown that we're trying to develop. I think that's what our studies have been showing us. There's a nice subdivision that was built some time ago on Strawberry Plains. It's called Strawberry Plains subdivision. And the notion behind that was, if I remember correctly, that was developed with the concept that people who were affiliated with the city and the schools and such, they had first bite at that apple. And that is a nice concept to me. A place where the police, the fire, the teachers, the city employees, and maybe service industry people and who work in Colonial Williamsburg and hotels, that would be nice to see there. I'm disappointed with its current appearance. I don't see where it's appropriate for them to spend lots of money, but maybe at least take down the torn awning that's in front of it, flapping in the wind. Maybe paint over the graffiti. I think leaving it look as bad as it does right now just inspires people to say, oh, well, we got to do something. This is horrible. And this, whatever happens there, it should be something that we're going to be proud of for the next 100 years maybe. And because we're asking for special exceptions so that it's more financially beneficial for the developer, we really need to make sure that it's going to be beneficial for our community, all of our community. At the end of the day, this has been a great place for me to grow up and live. And I'd like to see other generations come here. I want to see Highland Park thrive. And I just feel like we need to make sure that we look more like Colonial Williamsburg than Colonial Heritage. Colonial Heritage is a great neighborhood, but we got to be able to have a diverse community where people can work and live and maybe walk to work. And it rubs me wrong that the majority of the people who work in Matthew Whaley, the fire department, the police department, the municipal building, the library, and the hotels and retail, within a mile of there, the majority of them won't be able to afford to live there. And if we're serious about finding some housing for them, well, where else is it going to go? I mean, this is wedged between train tracks and a hard-working blue-collar neighborhood. This seems like a great location for that. I don't see where we're going to put it somewhere else anytime soon. They're talking about really, really nice houses next to the golf course, which is great. So we're certainly not going to put affordable workforce housing there. So that's where I am. I think our community is special, and I think giving a special use permit with increased density and encroachment on slopes so that more money can be made and we'll have fewer people in our community who can walk to work and afford to live here is a struggle for me.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Tarley? Thoughts?
Well, thank you. I appreciate Mr. Granger's thoughts, and, I think we have to look at the fact that other than the 30% slope, this use is permitted at 14 units per acre. So we're here on special use to increase that density. So I don't think that really changes that much, other than what sort of concessions or thoughts should we give as to whether we should increase the density. And certainly the proffer of a certain percentage of units addresses some of that issue. I do agree with Ms. Davis, and I expressed this the last time it came, although there was a traffic study indicating that no additional traffic improvements were necessary. There is, that will be a lot of traffic. There is a lot of traffic that redirects off the interstate and comes off Colonial Parkway to go into the city in that direction. So that certainly would be a concern, and I would hope that the traffic study turns out to be accurate. But I do think it's important, and the developer has taken into consideration the height issues relating to the sight lines from Highland Park. And so on the one hand, I do share Mr. Granger's concerns that the city needs to address the issue of workforce housing and be more assertive to the extent it can in providing incentives, because otherwise certain of these properties are not cost effective to develop. And here, this particular request, the last time what we approved was 18 units per acre, and this is another increase. It certainly might be worth considering whether those original proffers are still fit within what they've proposed anew.
Mr. Sokolowski?
Yeah. So I think Mr. Granger touched on a really important point here. I know last year when I was largely looking at this project simply from like a site plan perspective, and the slope encroachments were okay and everything was pretty positive, but yeah, there is this question of kind of precedent of what we're allowing our neighborhoods, what our city is there to support, what kind of community we're trying to support. I know we had also last year looked at a neighborhood balance committee report, and there was a lot of conversation between William and Mary students and longtime residents, but I didn't really see a whole lot about affordable housing for the working class community that really makes our city run. And I've been here lived in the city for 15 years, grew up here, went through the public school system and everything. It was kind of shocking to me to realize at like a young age that the vast majority of my teachers were commuting from Newport News and Norfolk, and that there was just this lack of affordable housing. And like Mr. Granger also pointed out, like this is a prime location to think like, why not? Then again, the question that's posed before us today isn't necessarily a question of, I don't think it's really in our purview to say, you have to make it affordable housing or not. It's really about looking at it from a site plan perspective, but I think it's really important that we include this conversation and make these points clear to City Council when they also deliberate on this about what kind of precedent we want to establish. I was also really concerned to hear that although there is this 13% allowed for affordable housing units, the other 87% will be at a much higher rate, and the people affording those places will thereby increase the median area income. So it could very well be that after year one, those affordable housing units are no longer affordable. And I'm also concerned that this median area income statistic might be used as a rule of thumb for a number of other developments in the area that could then negatively impact the residents of Highland Park. And I think it's just really important to look at that contextually and the impact on the community that's been there.
Thank you. Gail?
Obviously, I'm new to this and new to this being my first hearing, so just kind of digesting everything, and from what brief research prior to this. But I guess for the record, I agree with a lot that Mr. Granger says. Thinks he makes a lot of valid points, but on the other side, what's they're being done is permitted, and the special use permit is permitted, and staff has approved it. So I hate to penalize someone for doing something that's permitted, even though it doesn't hit a certain aspect that we would like. So that's just kind of my initial position and thoughts.
And like John, I'm so new to the process. I'm listening to the points that all the commission members are making, and I have to digest some of this. But it does seem that when we talk about affordable housing in our area, my sense is that maybe we need to look at a historic triangle perspective rather than City of Williamsburg sometimes, because when I think about friends of ours, most of our friends live in York County, and York County is right there, and so I wonder how many of our workforce actually live in York County, which is not horribly outside of our area. Similarly with particularly Upper James County, James City County, there may be other members of our workforce that are in that area. And so I'm kind of more of the thought process that what does the historic triangle look like in terms of affordable housing? And maybe it's not something we're going to be able to provide in the city of Williamsburg to the extent that we would like to, simply because of our demographics and the fact that we're landlocked and we don't have a lot of rural property left to develop. So those are just my thoughts on it. And that's going forward.
Thank you. One of the constraints that I feel very strongly is the fact that we had a hearing on essentially this identical project. Very few changes, very few details changed on August 19th, 2020, and we voted with Mr. Granger's no vote. The rest voted, the majority voted to approve this. It went to City Council. It was approved, and the applicant has acted on that. The transaction has closed. They've expended a lot of money, based on in reliance on our on those votes, our vote and the City Council vote, and I would feel very uncomfortable changing my vote, and I think the applicant would certainly not be well served if they come before the city in 2020 and get one result, and then come before the city in 2022 on what is essentially the same application and get a different result, having spent a lot of time and money in between. Having said that, I agree with Mr. Granger wholeheartedly about the need for affordable housing in our community, and with Ms. Liebel that the community might well extend beyond. So we need a regional approach. We need to be able to look at where our people can afford to live. The key people that we are shut down without, as Mr. Granger mentioned, the restaurant folks, for example. So I will be supporting. I will be voting in favor of this primarily for purposes of consistency. But I really want us to encourage as much of this conversation as we can going forward. Any other comments?
Yeah, a brief one. I really liked some of the points that got brought up here, and as well, I think it'd be really interesting to look at kind of more of a report about our workforce and where they live, especially with regards to the historic triangle, and if these commutes are reasonable, and hopefully in the future we'd be able to see some businesses, like Mr. Granger said, around Christmas time would actually be thriving when we do have people here. The other thing I would like to bring up, though, is the impact directly on Highland Park. I was able to go by that property and kind of look at the visibility from Highland Park and down Burbank Street. And it's quite a visible project. I do think it'd be really valuable for the residents of that neighborhood to maybe have a little bit more input into, we already heard a little bit about concerns about where this bus stop is going to be placed, and I'm not sure necessarily that the neighborhood that is most directly affected by this development will have like a say in these kind of matters. So I'd just like to see some more of that going forward. I'm not sure if that necessarily has to do with the question we're faced with today, but I would like to have that on record.
Yeah, there's certainly, there will be public input opportunities for the bus, the location of the bus stop, although I think there's a sort of a logical spot there for it, isn't there, as you said in your presentation?
So the bus stop location we're kind of literally between a rock and a hard place at that location. There's a lot of slopes to deal with, and so we have some accessibility issues that WADA has to address as far as being able to stop a bus and have people safely access the bus and things like that, and then the ability to have the right-of-way necessary to install a bus stop. All of those conversations are taking place essentially between WADA and the city engineer to make sure that there's space in there. But I don't know how WADA handles the public input side of that. They have a board of directors meeting every month, and there is an open forum at that point for the public to provide input, but I don't know if something as minor as a stop itself would warrant a board discussion. I do anticipate in my preliminary conversations that the stop would be kind of a temporary to see the ridership and things like that before they actually install the shelter and the benches and all of that kind of stuff. So if the location turns out to be not beneficial to the residents of this development or to the residents of Highland Park, they would certainly be able to consider another location. And I don't know enough about the workings of WADA to know how that works. So I know that they're looking at some routing changes as well. So that will be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I'm amazed we don't have a bus stop there yet. Just amazed. So it's good that apparently we'll at least have a temporary bus stop.
And when I say temporary, I just mean that they want to gauge the ridership at that particular location. So one of the concerns that we had heard from Highland Park is the hill. You kind of come down the hill and then go back up the hill, and how accessible is that to the residents? The converse of that is placing a bus stop further into Highland Park is requiring some right-of-way, moving and acquisition. And so it's just, we have to kind of fine-tune that placement.
All right. Thank you.
Ms. Workman, should we address each of these separately? I'm
Address
Sheldon.
them- I
I'm
mean, they were-
sorry.
That's all right.
It's
Happens all
from
the
law
time.
school.
You can address them together, they're related, or you can address them separately as the commission chooses.
Okay, I think we did them together last time. Does anybody object to together? Okay, is there a motion?
I would move to recommend approval of PCR 22017 and PCR 220. Off the
Okay.
memorandum.
Okay, the agenda.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Can you mention in the motion the site plan as well? Because the site plan is contingent upon city council approval. If
I
you're,
have
if you're
20
comfortable with that,
I am. Do we have, is 22 correct?
Site plan number?
Or the PCR number?
The agenda has 21.
And I'm reading from the memorandum.
I'm presuming it was filed last year, so that's why I was going with 21.
Let me get to my last page. So it should be PCR 21-017 and PCR 21-018 are the special use permits, and then site plan number 21-010.
010?
Yes, sir.
Strike that.
Now for a motion.
I move to recommend approval of PCR 21017 and 21018, as well as site plan 21010.
And could I just ask you to add contingent upon the approval of the special use permit by the city council?
Which is conditioned upon the approval of city council of the special use permit.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Oh, I was looking for a second. Oh.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
No?
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Sokolowski?
No.
Ms. Lyle?
No.
Okay, our next item is the 5-year capital improvement program, the CIP. This is an open hearing, an opportunity for the public to address items for inclusion in the capital improvement program. Opportunity for anyone to come forward and express opinions about that. So I am not seeing anyone, so I will close that public hearing. We don't have site plans or subdivisions specifically on the agenda. We don't have unfinished business on the agenda. We have new business of chair committee appointments, which we have discussed and will be as follows. The Site Plan Review Committee, Mr. Granger will continue on that. Thank you. Mr. Sokolowski will continue on that. Thank you for that. Ms. Liebel and Mr. Kale will be joining that committee. Our representative on the EDA will be Mr. Tarley. Our representative on the ARB will be Ms. Liebel. You can't escape from the ARB. Our representative on the Williamsburg Public Art Council will be Mr. Sokolowski. Thank you for doing that. We have a seat on the TDFRC, but I understand, conferring with the chair, that they don't have any meetings scheduled. We are still down one member waiting for City Council to appoint, so I'm not going to appoint anyone to that to that committee at this point, and we'll deal with that later. So is there any other new business that we need to discuss? Anybody have anything? Okay. We have our informational items, including the City Council report, Planning Department report, financial statement, and we have bylaws. I hope everyone has had a chance to look at the bylaws. We can amend them. We don't have anything pending on that. We have a public hearing scheduled for February 16th. Tidal Wave Auto Spa and Wata. I encourage everyone to go out and look at particularly the 1800 Richmond Road location, just so we have a good idea of what that is, because I think there probably will be some issues, some questions and concerns about that for us to deal with. Next week we have a work session, 26th of January at 4 p.m. here in these chambers to talk about the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. We'll have a presentation from staff, and that'll be our opportunity to give input to City Council on what we would like to see in that plan. Anything else?
We did have site plan review this morning on the tidal wave, so I agree with everybody who was not there at the meeting today to make yourself familiar with that parcel, make yourself familiar with the proposal.
Okay, one additional, thank you, Mr. Charlie. One additional thing I'd like to mention, and Mr. Charlie and I were discussing this earlier. We have members spread out throughout city boards and commissions, but we don't often get input back. So I would like to figure out a way that we can, we can have an official sort of reporting back of things that are going on that impact the work that we're doing, or may potentially impact the work that we're doing. So I'll just mention that to staff. Anything else? Okay, we are adjourned.